My name is Ethan. I'm 36 years old, and if someone had told me 2 years ago that my entire world would collapse at the hands of the woman I once adored, I would have laughed in their face. Rachel, my wife, used to be my everything. We had built a modest, stable life together. 2 beautiful kids, a small house in the suburbs, and a love I thought was unbreakable. But that illusion shattered the moment Rachel got her new job. At first, I was nothing but proud of her. She'd landed a managerial role at a fast-growing marketing firm. She was excited, energized, glowing even. I remember taking her out to dinner to celebrate, thinking how lucky I was to have a wife who was both ambitious and grounded. But soon, something in her shifted. It started off subtle. She began coming home later than usual, brushing off my questions with vague explanations. Client meeting ran long. The girls and I grabbed a drink after work. I wanted to believe her. I really did. Then came the mood swings. Rachel would snap at me over the smallest things, how I loaded the dishwasher, how I folded laundry. She'd accuse me of being clingy or paranoid whenever I asked where she was. There was a coldness in her eyes I'd never seen before. Our once lively dinners turned into silence. Our bedroom became a ghost town. I started waking up alone, her side of the bed untouched. Sometimes, I'd hear her laughing softly downstairs in the middle of the night. She claimed it was just memes or a late-night talk with a coworker. But something about that laughter, it didn't belong to the Rachel I knew. The red flags kept piling up. She became obsessed with her phone, guarding it like it held state secrets. She'd step outside to take calls, speaking in hushed tones. When I'd ask her about it, she'd roll her eyes and accuse me of being insecure. "Why don't you trust me, Ethan?" she asked one night, arms folded, eyes daring me to answer. That question stuck with me. Why didn't I trust her? Maybe because she'd stopped giving me a reason to. Then one night, everything shifted. Rachel came home well past midnight. Her makeup was smeared, and her breath reeked of alcohol. She staggered in without even glancing my way and collapsed on the couch. I stood there, staring at the woman I no longer recognized. I gently asked if she was okay, and she waved me off like I was a nuisance. "Don't baby me," she slurred. "I'm not some little housewife you get to control." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, watching her snore on the couch, wondering where it all went wrong. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She even kissed the kids on the forehead before heading off to work, humming a tune I'd never heard before. That week, I tried to be patient. I cooked dinner. I cleaned the house. I picked up the kids from school, trying to hold the family together. But Rachel had already checked out emotionally. She'd come home, plug in her headphones, and scroll through her phone with a blank expression. When I asked her if we could talk, she said she was tired. Always tired. Too tired to speak. Too tired to try. But she wasn't too tired to text. One evening, while she was in the shower, I saw her phone light up. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But curiosity, or maybe desperation, got the better of me. The screen showed a message from someone saved as J. Work. It read, "Friday night can't come soon enough. I need you again." My heart dropped. My hands shook. I couldn't breathe. I didn't unlock the phone. I didn't need to. I already knew. I spent the next few days battling a storm inside me. I didn't want to accuse her without evidence. What if I was wrong? What if Jay was just a harmless flirtation? But then came the final straw. Rachel sat me down one night. Her expression was calm, almost rehearsed. She said she'd been doing a lot of thinking, and that she wanted to explore the idea of an open relationship. I felt like the ground had cracked beneath my feet. She used all the buzzwords: freedom, growth, self-discovery. She said monogamy felt like a cage, and she didn't want to live with regrets. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just looked at her and nodded. I told her I understood. And then, while she was busy explaining how this would make us stronger, I quietly reached into my pocket and pressed record on my phone. She admitted it all. 2 affairs with married men from her office. One of them had already left his wife, she said proudly. And the third? Jay, the co-worker from the texts, he was next on her list. She was planning a weekend getaway at a motel with him. I asked why she was doing this, and her answer cut deeper than anything else. Because I want to feel alive again. That night, I lay in bed while Rachel slept peacefully next to me. I stared at the ceiling, unable to blink, unable to breathe. The woman I married was gone, replaced by someone who had no remorse, no guilt, no shame. But I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to do what she didn't expect. I was going to wait, plan, prepare, and then I would make sure she never saw it coming. The morning after Rachel confessed her affairs and her desire for an open marriage, the air in our home felt heavier. The silence between us was no longer awkward. It was strategic. She carried herself with an odd sense of freedom, like her burden had been lifted now that her betrayal was out in the open. But for me, every breath felt like swallowing broken glass. I kept the recording of her confession tucked away in a secure folder on a hard drive I immediately encrypted. I backed it up on a hidden USB and stored it in the safe under the stairs, the same one where we kept birth certificates and passports. I wasn't thinking about forgiveness. I was thinking about survival and revenge. Rachel, meanwhile, acted as though we were partners in this new, enlightened phase of marriage. She started leaving books about polyamory and self-discovery around the house. One afternoon, I found a dog-eared copy of Sex at Dawn lying on my pillow. The arrogance of it made my blood boil. She truly believed she had convinced me to go along with her fantasy. That I would stand by and wait while she explored motel rooms with other men. That I'd still mow the lawn, pick up the kids, and kiss her goodnight when she stumbled back home reeking of someone else. It was clear Rachel was preparing for her weekend with Jay. She told me she had a team-building retreat coming up and would be gone from Friday evening to Sunday night. The lies were insulting, and her confidence in them even more so. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. I pretended to nod along, playing the part of the spineless husband she assumed I'd become. In truth, I had already begun my own investigation. I bought a subscription to a phone monitoring app, a stealth tool meant for parental control, but it would serve my purpose. That night, while she slept, I installed it on her phone. It took less than 10 minutes. By the next morning, every call, every message, every keystroke was being uploaded in real time to a secure portal on my laptop. The floodgates opened. I read message after message in a group chat between her and her 3 closest work friends, Claire, Amber, and Josie. They called themselves the Wild Wives Club, and their conversations made my stomach churn. They joked about their husbands being too boring, about real men who knew how to satisfy them. Then came something far worse. Claire, if Ethan finds out, just cry and say he's abusive. It works. Courts always believe the woman. Rachel, I don't think I'll have to. He's too passive. He'll fold. Amber, still, get ahead of it. Maybe mention he's been depressed or unstable. Lay the groundwork. I felt like vomiting. This wasn't just cheating. It was a premeditated smear campaign. A plan to destroy me if I dared to stand in her way. My marriage wasn't just ending. It was being weaponized against me. But now I had all the ammo I needed. Using GPS tracking from the spy app, I confirmed the motel booking Rachel had made. She even had the audacity to save the reservation confirmation in her email under a folder titled Wellness Retreat. I copied the address, the room number, the time of check-in, every detail. But I wasn't going there alone. I had someone else in mind. Jay's wife. Her name was Jenna, and I found her through some light social media stalking. Unlike Rachel, Jenna had a public profile. She looked kind, sweet even, and from her photos, clearly devoted to her family. Her timeline was filled with pictures of her and Jay with their 2 kids at school functions, birthday parties, and church events. I hesitated at first. It felt invasive. But then I thought about my children, what Rachel was risking, what she was planning to destroy, and the hesitation vanished. I created an anonymous email account and sent Jenna everything. Screenshots of the texts, voice clips from Rachel's phone, even a copy of the motel reservation. I didn't include my name. I simply wrote, "You deserve the truth. He's meeting my wife this weekend. Room 218. 2 days passed before she replied. Thank you. I'll be there. Friday came fast. Rachel packed her small overnight bag, kissed our kids goodbye like nothing was out of the ordinary, and told me not to wait up. I smiled, nodded, and wished her a relaxing weekend. She left at 5:17 p.m. At 6:42 p.m., Jenna and I pulled into the parking lot of the motel. We didn't speak much. She didn't cry, didn't shout. She looked focused, like a soldier stepping onto a battlefield. I handed her the room number and told her I'd wait in the car. But she shook her head. "No," she said. "You need to see what your wife really is." We walked to room 218 together. As we approached the door, I heard muffled voices and music playing inside. Rachel's favorite playlist. She used to dance to those songs in our kitchen while making pancakes for the kids. The sound made my stomach twist. Jenna raised her hand and knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Then she pounded on the door and shouted, "Jay, open up, you lying bastard." There was a sudden silence inside. A scuffling sound. Then, after what felt like forever, the door creaked open. Rachel stood there, wrapped in a hotel towel, her face pale, her hair wet. Her eyes widened as she saw me standing beside Jenna. And for the first time in months, maybe years, I saw real fear in her face. I didn't say a word, because I didn't need to. Not anymore. Rachel's face, frozen in shock, was everything I needed to see. She clutched the edge of her towel like it was the last thread holding her dignity together. Behind her, Jay appeared, shirtless, stammering, trying to hide behind her like a coward. Jenna pushed the door open wide and stormed in, fury blazing in her eyes. "You son of a b***tch," she screamed, pointing at Jay. "How long? Huh? While I was home raising your kids, you were out here with this trash." Rachel tried to interject, but Jenna spun toward her. "And you? How dare you look me in the eye like you're the victim?" Jay stepped forward and tried to put his hands on Jenna's shoulders, but she slapped them away. "Don't you dare touch me," she said, her voice trembling. "I want you out of the house. Tonight." She turned to me, her expression softening just slightly. "Thank you for showing me the truth." Then she left, slamming the motel door behind her. Rachel and I stood in silence. She tried to speak, her lips parting slowly, her eyes glassy. "Ethan, I raised a hand to stop her." "No, you don't get to explain. You already did, on tape." Her face drained of all color. "What are you talking about?" "I recorded everything, Rachel. Every word you said that night about your affairs, about this weekend, about how I was just too weak to do anything about it. You underestimated me." I walked out, leaving her stunned in that room with the consequences she had written for herself. That motel hallway felt like the longest walk of my life, but also the most liberating. The weight I'd been carrying, every suspicion, every lie, every insult, lifted with every step I took away from her. When I got home, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel sad. I felt sharp, like the pain had refined me into something harder, colder. I sat down, opened my laptop, and backed up the recording to 3 separate drives. I made a timeline, downloaded all the evidence from the spy app, and even printed out key messages in case anything ever went to court. That weekend, Rachel didn't come home. I didn't ask why. I didn't care. When she finally showed up on Monday evening, she was quiet, distant, almost ghostly. She didn't ask where the kids were. She didn't ask about dinner. She just went upstairs and locked herself in the bedroom. Later that night, I got a call from Claire, one of the wild wives. I let it go to voicemail. When I listened back, her message made my skin crawl. "Hey Ethan, just a heads up. Rachel's kind of freaking out. She thinks you might try something. Just so you know, we've got screenshots of some texts she could use if things get ugly." It was blackmail. Thinly veiled, but blackmail nonetheless. They were trying to frame a narrative, to turn the story before I could expose it. But they had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. Every conversation, every threat, every piece of manipulation, I documented it all. Time-stamped. Cataloged. Ready. 2 days later, Rachel asked to talk. She stood in the kitchen with a hollow look in her eyes. "I think we should try counseling," she said. "We owe that to the kids, don't you think?" I looked her dead in the eye. "You owed them that before you chose motel rooms over family dinners. You made your choice." She broke down crying. The tears were real, but they weren't for me. They were for herself. For her image. For her loss of control. "I'm not a bad person," she whispered. "I didn't say you were," I replied. "But you're not my person anymore." The next morning, I contacted my lawyer. I filed for legal separation and began custody proceedings. My attorney was smart, tactical. She reviewed all the evidence and told me, "We're going to blindside her." That same week, I met Jenna again. We had coffee. She looked exhausted but lighter somehow, like she'd finally come up for air. "I kicked him out," she said. "He begged, cried, promised it was a mistake. But once trust breaks, it's gone." I nodded. We were strangers before, but now we were soldiers who had walked the same battlefield. As Rachel's world began to collapse, mine was starting to rebuild. Quietly, piece by piece. I took time off work, focused on the kids, made our home feel like a safe place again. I slept better, breathed easier, and smiled more in 1 week than I had in the last 6 months. But Rachel wasn't done yet. She began telling her friends I was emotionally abusive, that I was gaslighting her. She spun a narrative online, one that painted her as a confused woman just trying to find herself in a marriage that had long been dead. I ignored the noise. I had facts. I had recordings. I had patience. And I was going to let her dig her own grave, one post, one lie, one desperate move at a time. She still had no idea just how much I knew, or what was coming next. After the motel ambush, word traveled fast, faster than I ever imagined. Rachel thought she could manage the fallout, twist it into some temporary rough patch narrative, and come out the other side still wearing her wedding ring. But what she didn't know was that I had no interest in salvaging anything. I wasn't here to fix what she broke. I was here to bury it. She tried to pretend nothing had happened. She walked around the house that week like a ghost in heels, putting on makeup, making casual conversation, even offering to cook dinner one night. I let her play her little charade, nodding when appropriate, answering when necessary, all while collecting more and more evidence in silence. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore. The rot went deeper. Her so-called friends kept feeding her advice like poison: lie, flip the script, preemptively play the victim. But I had receipts. Everything was saved. Screenshots of their group chat, voice memos of their plans, call logs, motel bookings, enough to sink every one of them. Then came the night she tried to turn it around. She stood in the doorway to our bedroom and softly asked, "Can we talk?" I was sitting at my desk, looking over school forms for the kids. I didn't even look up. "Talk about what?" "I know I made mistakes," she said. "But you're not innocent either. You've been cold, distant." I turned to face her. "Cold," I repeated. "You cheated on me, lied to me, tried to destroy my character behind my back. And now I'm cold." Her eyes filled with tears, the kind that used to make me want to hold her. Now they made my stomach turn. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. She shifted gears fast. "I want to work through this," she said. "For the kids." That line. For the kids. It always comes when they realize they're losing. I stood up slowly, walked past her, and went downstairs. She followed. "What are you doing?" she asked. I opened the cabinet, pulled out a manila folder, and placed it on the table. "This," I said, "is what I've been doing." She opened it and started flipping through. Printouts of her messages, highlighted transcripts, motel confirmation receipts, a copy of her confession from the night she told me about the affairs, all documented, all legal. She looked up at me in shock. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been protecting myself," I replied. "You were planning to accuse me of abuse. You were ready to paint me as unstable. Don't act like you were the victim here." Her mask cracked then. The softness vanished, replaced by a snarl. "You think anyone will believe you? You think the courts care about your feelings?" I leaned in. "I don't care what the courts think. I care what the truth is. And I've got enough truth here to bury your lies before they ever see daylight." She went silent after that. And for a few days, she actually stayed gone, moved in with Claire or Amber, probably plotting their next move. But that was fine. I needed time, and so did my lawyer. We filed the motion for divorce that week. Irreconcilable differences, full custody requested, citing adultery and emotional abuse. My attorney said the case was clean and solid. It would take time, but I was in a strong position. I felt prepared. But then, Rachel tried something new. Christmas was approaching, and she showed up at my parents' house during our family dinner, uninvited. She wore a bright red dress, her hair curled, smiling like nothing had happened. My mother answered the door and almost dropped the serving tray. "I came to see the kids," she chirped. I stood behind my mom and met Rachel's eyes. "No, you didn't. You came to be seen. You can't keep them from me," she hissed. "I'm not. The court will handle that. But right now, you're not welcome here." Rachel looked around, expecting someone, anyone, to defend her. But no one moved. Even her own sister, who had come by for dessert, shook her head. "Leave, Rachel," she said. "Not tonight." Rachel's smile crumbled. She turned, heels clicking on the driveway, her head held high, but her shoulders trembling. And just like that, the last door she thought she could barge into closed behind her. I knew then that her world was beginning to collapse, and she would fight like hell to drag me into the rubble. So I did what I always did. I prepared. I copied every new message, tracked every strange call, and even installed new cameras around the house. Not because I was scared of her, but because I couldn't trust the version of her she'd become. Whatever love I once had for Rachel had been hollowed out and replaced by something else, clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't grieving. I was done, and I was ready. After Rachel's humiliating attempt to crash our family Christmas, things took a darker turn. Whatever mask she had been wearing to keep up appearances was gone now. The texts she used to send me, the passive-aggressive guilt trips and half-hearted apologies, turned venomous. I started receiving long, unhinged messages in the middle of the night. One moment she was begging to reconcile, saying I was her soulmate, that this was just a confused chapter in her life. The next moment, she'd accuse me of destroying her future, of manipulating the kids, of being emotionally abusive. She was unraveling, and I was documenting everything. The group chat between her and her friends grew even more disturbing. I watched it unfold in real time. They were urging her to go public with a fabricated story, saying I had been spying on her long before she ever cheated, that I was controlling and jealous. They even went as far as suggesting she claim I had anger issues. That one especially stung. If only they knew how many nights I'd sat in silence, biting down on every ounce of rage just to keep the peace. But the truth? The truth was something they couldn't erase, and I had it all in black and white. One night, I started feeling sick, feverish, weak, and off. I thought it was just stress until I went to the doctor. The test results left me speechless. Chlamydia. I hadn't slept with anyone besides Rachel in over a year, and I sure as hell hadn't cheated. When I confronted her, she had the audacity to deny everything. It must have been a false positive, she said, arms crossed like I was accusing her of stealing a candy bar. I laughed, not out of humor, but disbelief. You gave me an STD, I said, and you're still pretending this isn't your fault? She stormed out. No apology, no remorse, just more deflection. I took the diagnosis and filed it under medical evidence. My lawyer added it to the documentation, and her expression changed the moment she saw it. We're adding this to the custody argument, she said. You're building a fortress. Still, I wasn't taking any chances. Rachel's behavior was getting unpredictable. She started showing up unannounced, outside my office, at the grocery store, even once at the daycare where I picked up the kids. Nothing illegal, just enough to rattle me. Enough to feel her presence pressing in where she no longer belonged. My attorney advised a restraining order. At first, I hesitated. I didn't want to escalate things unnecessarily. But that was before Rachel came to the house, uninvited, and started yelling on the front lawn, loud enough for the neighbors to peek through their windows. The kids were inside. They heard everything. That was the last straw. We filed for a temporary restraining order, and it was granted within 48 hours. She was barred from coming near the house, the kids' school, or my workplace. I felt a strange relief signing the papers. Like I had finally carved out a boundary that couldn't be twisted by her words or her manipulation. But Rachel didn't back down. No, she adapted. She started attending our custody mediation meetings dressed like she was going to a nightclub, low-cut blouses, heavy makeup, flirtatious smiles. It wasn't subtle. She tried to make eye contact across the table, even flash quick smirks when the mediator turned away. Her strategy wasn't to plead her case as a responsible parent. It was to provoke me. But I didn't bite. I sat still, calm, and professional. I answered every question clearly. I stuck to the facts. And I knew that every little outburst from her, every glare, every sarcastic laugh, was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. Then came the recorded call. I still don't know if she forgot I was logging everything, or if she was just too far gone to care. But one night, she left me a voicemail that was over 5 minutes long. Slurred words. Laughter. Her and her friends mocking the court, mocking me, even joking about the STD. He's probably crying himself to sleep, she giggled. Bet he still thinks I loved him. That voicemail was like gold. My lawyer's eyes lit up when she heard it. This, she said, is what we show the judge. Rachel didn't just destroy our marriage. She turned it into ammunition for her own demise. And the more I stayed silent, the more she revealed herself. To the court, to the public, and eventually, to her own family. Because soon, even they wouldn't be able to defend her. And when the truth fully came out, it would be her turn to beg. For mercy, for forgiveness, for a life she threw away. But by then, I would be long gone. Rachel had always believed she was the one in control. That no matter how badly she twisted the truth, how deep she sank into lies, she'd always have the upper hand. But as the court hearings loomed and the evidence piled higher than her stories could cover, cracks in her confidence started to show. She stopped smiling during mediation. Her flirty clothes became defensive blazers. The woman who once mocked my pain with her friends now showed up quiet, twitchy, eyes darting like a cornered animal. She was beginning to understand what it felt like to lose. My attorney suggested we offer her a deal, something to fast-track the divorce and avoid dragging it out longer than necessary. "We're going to win either way," she said. "But if we dangle money in front of her, she might sign without a fight." So we drafted an agreement. $60,000 in exchange for an uncontested divorce, a clean break, and no claim to spousal support. My lawyer was clear. Once she signed, that was it. No revisions. No second chances. I sent Rachel the offer through her attorney. She didn't respond for 3 days. Then, out of nowhere, she called me. It was late, past midnight. Her voice was low, slurred, like she'd had a few drinks. 60,000? She scoffed. "Is that what you think I'm worth?" "No," I replied. "It's what your silence is worth." There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing. "I'll sign," she said at last. "But don't think you've won. I already have." She hung up. The documents were signed within the week. No objections. No revisions. No fight. The woman who once threatened to ruin me with lies and manipulation had sold herself out for a payout she could burn through in a month. It was over. Or so I thought. Less than a week after the ink dried, I got a call from a mutual friend, someone who hadn't picked a side, who just happened to still follow Rachel's social media. "You need to see her story," he said. "Now." I pulled it up. There she was, at a party, holding a drink, surrounded by Claire, Amber, and Josie. The caption read, "Divorce party freedom never looked this good." In the background, I could hear music blasting, someone chanting, "Single and sexy. No more rules." It was disgusting, but also revealing. I noticed something else. In the next few stories, they were drinking in a car. The driver, Amber, was visibly drunk, slurring her words, flashing gang signs at the camera. They were high out of their minds, laughing like schoolgirls. I recorded everything. Later that night, the crash made the news. 1 dead, 2 arrested, 1 in critical condition, DUI, meth possession. Rachel was in the back seat. She survived with minor injuries, but her mugshot made the rounds in local media. Sunken eyes, smeared makeup, a face that looked nothing like the Rachel I had married. And the aftermath? It was swift. The police showed up at my house 2 days later. Apparently, they'd gotten an anonymous tip suggesting I might be linked to the drugs found in the car. Rachel, in her panic, had named me, said I might have given her the pills to calm her down during the divorce. Desperation doesn't even begin to describe it. They searched my home, tore through drawers, appended closets, questioned me for hours. And when they found nothing, as I knew they wouldn't, I stared at the lead officer and asked, "How many false reports like this do you get in a week?" He sighed. "More than I care to count. Sorry for the inconvenience, sir." Inconvenience? My children had watched strangers tear through their home. That wasn't an inconvenience. That was trauma. That was what their mother had become. Someone so twisted in her own self-destruction, she'd burn her own kids' peace of mind just to spite me. That was the last straw. I called the realtor the next day. I was done with that house. With its memories. With its ghosts. I listed it within the week, packed what I could, and moved into a condo on the other side of town. Somewhere clean. Somewhere fresh. Rachel, meanwhile, had vanished. After the DUI incident, after her face hit the local news and her job fired her, she went completely off the radar. No calls. No texts. Not even the usual social media chaos. It was like she'd disappeared. For the first time in months, I breathed. I walked my kids to school without checking over my shoulder. I slept without locking the bedroom door. I didn't wait for the next phone call, the next lie, the next mess to clean up. I was free. But deep down, I knew Rachel wasn't gone. Not really. Because people like her don't vanish. They decay. And then they come back, dragging their misery with them. And when she did, I knew I'd be ready. I thought Rachel had vanished. But as I learned, people like her don't simply disappear. They spiral. And when they crash, they take anyone close down with them. It had been a month since the DUI, the failed accusation, and her termination. The silence was eerie, like the calm before a storm you know is still brewing just beyond the hills. Then I got a call from her parents. They asked to meet in person, somewhere neutral, without the kids. That alone told me it was serious. We met at a quiet coffee shop in town. Her father looked worn down, older than I remembered, and her mother wouldn't even make eye contact. We didn't know the extent of it, he said quietly. Rachel told us a different story. I nodded, letting him speak. But after the arrest, after what she said about you to the police, and when we saw the photos, the social media posts, we know now. We're so sorry. They told me they wanted to help with the kids, that they supported me filing for full custody. Rachel hadn't contacted them since the crash. She was living with one of the wild wives, Josie, who, ironically, was now confined to a wheelchair after the accident. The universe had a twisted way of handing out justice, but I couldn't deny the grim satisfaction of watching their empire of lies cave in on itself. I filed for full legal custody the following day. My attorney moved swiftly. With the criminal charges pending, the drug reports, and Rachel's increasingly erratic behavior, the judge had little reason to delay. Within 2 weeks, I was granted temporary full custody. The final hearing would be scheduled in the months ahead, but even a temporary order felt like a breath of clean air. When Rachel found out, she didn't even try to dispute it legally. Instead, she showed up at my condo. It was a Saturday morning, and I had just finished making pancakes for the kids when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach tighten. She looked like a ghost of herself, skin pale, hair matted, hoodie 3 sizes too big. She clutched a crumpled bag and swayed slightly, as if she were struggling to stay upright. I just want to see them, she slurred. I didn't open the door. Rachel, you're under a restraining order. You need to leave before I call the police. They're my kids too, Ethan. Not right now, they're not. She started crying, pounding her fists against the door. I called the police. When they arrived, she didn't resist. She curled into herself as they gently placed her in the back of the cruiser. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just stared blankly at me through the tinted window, and for a brief second, I felt something close to sorrow. But sorrow couldn't outweigh the damage she'd done. And then came the twist I never saw coming. A week later, I received a message through Jenna, Jay's ex-wife. We hadn't spoken much since our motel sting, but she reached out saying she had urgent news. I think you should hear this, she said. We met at the same cafe where I'd spoken with Rachel's parents. This time, Jenna wasn't alone. Sitting beside her was Kara, another one of the wild wives. Or what was left of her. Kara looked like she'd barely survived a war. Bruises still healing, an arm in a sling, and a nervous tremble in her voice. They turned on her, she said. Amber, Claire, even Josie. After the crash, they blamed Rachel for everything. Took her money, her phone, beat her, locked her in that apartment for days. I stared at her, shocked. You're telling me she was being held? She thought they were her friends, Kara said. But they dragged her into the mess they'd built. Meth, sex work, blackmail. It got worse after the DUI. They used her, controlled her. When she tried to leave, they made sure she couldn't. Apparently, it was Kara who escaped and called for help. Rachel had been missing because she was trapped in the very web she had helped weave. That didn't excuse her actions, not by a long shot, but it explained the descent, the madness, the desperation. A day after our conversation, I got confirmation Rachel had been hospitalized. Minor injuries, severe drug withdrawal, and a psychological breakdown. She was placed on psychiatric hold after attempting to harm herself. And I, God help me, I visited. Not for her. For closure. For the kids. To see, for myself, if the woman I once loved still existed behind the ruins. She was thinner, weaker, but she looked up when I entered the room. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized something tragic. She wasn't the villain anymore. She was the wreckage. And I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. Rachel's eyes followed me across the hospital room, dull and hollow but still searching for something. Redemption? Pity? Maybe just a piece of the life she once had. I stood at the edge of her bed, arms crossed, unsure of why I'd even come. Part of me thought seeing her in that broken state would bring some twisted satisfaction. But it didn't. I'm sorry, she said again, barely above a whisper. I didn't mean for any of this. I wanted to ask her what exactly she hadn't meant. Cheating? Lying? Passing on an STD? Dragging me into a police investigation? traumatizing our kids? But I didn't, because the truth was, none of it mattered anymore. The damage was done, and the woman in front of me wasn't the Rachel I once loved. She was the wreckage left behind. You should focus on getting better, I said quietly. The kids need you to try. Her eyes welled up, and she turned her head away. I didn't stay long after that. I walked out of the hospital and into the cold evening air with a strange tightness in my chest. Not grief, not guilt, just a deep, aching sense of finality. Over the next few weeks, Rachel was moved to a rehab facility. Court-mandated, supervised, stripped of all rights until she could prove she was clean and stable. I updated the judge with every new development, but I didn't do it to punish her. I did it to protect my children. I'd learned the hard way that love doesn't always mean saving someone. Sometimes, it means stepping out of the blast zone and shielding what you can. Rachel stayed in rehab longer than expected. According to reports from the clinic, she struggled with the process, relapses, outbursts, even a physical altercation with another patient. I visited once more at the insistence of the counselor to facilitate a supervised conversation for the sake of future co-parenting. She looked better, clean clothes, brushed hair, but her eyes, they still carried a storm. They said you're trying to keep the kids from me forever, she said. No, I replied calmly. I'm trying to keep them safe. If you ever become the kind of mother they can rely on again, I won't stand in your way. But you're not there yet, Rachel. Not even close. She didn't argue, just nodded slowly and looked away. That was the last time I saw her alive. 2 weeks later, I got the call. Rachel had overdosed at the facility. Meth laced with fentanyl, smuggled in by another patient. They said it was accidental, that she hadn't been suicidal. But part of me didn't believe that. Part of me thought she'd made peace with where her life was going and decided not to fight anymore. I didn't cry when I heard the news. I sat down, alone in my living room, and stared at the floor for a long time. My hands were steady, my breath, even. I felt nothing. But later that night, after the kids were asleep, I stepped into the hallway closet where we'd stored old family albums. I pulled one out, flipped through the photos, beach vacations, birthday parties, Rachel holding the kids in her arms, both of us smiling like we had it all figured out. That's when the tears came. Because it wasn't just her death that broke me. It was everything she could have been, everything we could have been, that died with her. The good version of Rachel. The one I fell in love with before the deceit and the chaos. I mourned that Rachel, not the one who tried to destroy me. Her funeral was small. Her parents arranged it quietly, only a few close family members present. I brought the kids, but didn't let them approach the casket. I didn't want their last memory of their mother to be of a body in a box. Instead, I let them release balloons in the cemetery afterward, red ones, because they remembered how much she loved that color. As the balloons floated upward, my son asked, "Do you think she sees them, Dad?" I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I think she does. Afterward, I spoke briefly with her parents. They were broken, grief-stricken. They hugged me tighter than I expected, thanked me for trying as long as I did. I didn't correct them. I just nodded, because some truths are better left unspoken in the shadow of a grave. Weeks passed, then months. The house felt lighter, the air cleaner. I focused on the kids, on rebuilding something whole from the shards of what we once had. Therapy sessions, school events, bedtime stories. The simple things became my sanctuary. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. Just resolved. I learned that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means living without dragging the pain behind you. Rachel's story didn't end the way anyone expected, least of all me. But from her chaos, I found clarity. From her collapse, I found strength. And every time I look into my children's eyes, I see the reason I kept going. Not to win, but to protect. And now, finally, to live. Looking back on everything, I've come to realize that betrayal doesn't just break your heart. It challenges your identity, your strength, your will to carry on. But the truth is, pain has a strange way of refining us. It strips away illusions and forces us to see what truly matters. I learned that silence is not weakness. It's a weapon when used with patience and purpose. I learned that protecting your peace, your children, and your dignity sometimes means walking away without needing to scream. For those of us later in life, the lesson is clear. Love should never cost you your sanity, your safety, or your soul. If someone shows you who they truly are, believe them. Don't waste precious time trying to fix what someone else has already destroyed. Focus on the people who bring you peace, not chaos. And above all, know that it's never too late to rebuild, not just your life, but your sense of self. The years ahead can still hold joy, freedom, and strength, if you're brave enough to let go of the wreckage and walk toward what you deserve. I didn't just survive. I reclaimed myself. And that, I think, is the most important truth of all.